Hello, and welcome back to Suspended Fanimation. I'm your host, Dennis Patholkus, and this is Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 6, This Extraordinary Being, or Extraordinary Being, however you want to pronounce it. I like doing the emphasis a little bit more. It's a little more theatrical. But welcome, everybody. I don't know how many people are actually going to be here for this. I don't know if Watchmen is kind of waning now or what's going on, but we'll see what happens. Get a little business out of the way first. If you like what you see here, like, share, and subscribe down below there. And also, if you want to know when I'll be on live again next, you can hit the bell down below. If you already hit the bell, don't hit it again. It will unclick it. Go into the bell settings again, as many or as little notifications as you want. It's still a 50-50 chance of YouTube actually notifying you of when I'm on. If you want to know what I'm really going to be on, go to suspendedfanimation.com. Take a look at my schedule up there. Change that every week. And also my Facebook page, it's mirrored there as well. Speaking of Facebook, there is a Facebook group page. Go ahead and sign up, take a look at that. You guys can post stuff there. You can talk amongst yourselves, all that kind of good stuff. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram. I also have a Patreon page, but I don't have any tiers set up as of yet. I will at the end of this year, beginning of next year. There we go. So, spoiler alert, I am going to spoil this episode. If you have not seen the episode, go and watch the episode. Come on back and you can comment down below in the comment section. Thank you, Viking Bitch, for the new paddle. All right. So, for those of you who have not seen what I do here before, I do a recap first and a review. And you're going to say, why do you do a recap first? Because it helps me work through some of these episodes. Usually I've just seen it and I'm, broadcasting right after I've seen it. This one, I watched this one before I watched Mr. Robot. So it's kind of a back to back. So it helps me get through that, considering I just went through and did a Mr. Robot panel right before, or Mr. Robot video right before this. So where do we start off with? We start off with the credits, actually. So the credits started off with Watchmen. Someone smokes a cigarette, I guess, or has a little puff of smoke that comes across the Watchmen title, and it dissolves into Minutemen, is what it says. And I always remembered from the comic, from the original Watchmen comic, that Hooded Justice was an African American person. That's what I took away from it. But I remember them talking about it, and that's why I was kind of confused in the first couple episodes here, where they were showing it as a white guy. And yeah, this actually kind of makes more sense now with this episode, what they were doing here. So we start off with the Hooded Justice being interrogated by the FBI, and they want him to remove his hood so they can take a picture of him. And they know that he's been fucking Captain Metropolis. And Captain Metropolis has been recording all his sexual partners with a camera that he's had behind his picture in his room. And supposedly he's taking a film of him fucking Hoover and is blackmailing Hoover with it. And so what they want to do is they want to take a picture of the Hooded Justice, so that the Hooded Justice will go and pick up the film of Hoover from Captain Metropolis, burn it, and then they will rip up his picture of his face. So he ends up unmasking himself, and as one of the FBI guys pulls out his camera and tells him to say cheese, he punches him in the face, and then he just starts beating the fuck out of these FBI guys to the point where he ends up killing them. And then we see it's actually just part of that American Hero story that's been on TV, that's been playing, throughout this entire series, throughout this entire season. So this whole first season is supposed to be an entire encapsulated episode, or an entire encapsulated story. So it's kind of a beginning, middle, and end, supposedly. And then if they get a second season, they're going to do something else. Don't know what, if that's going to work, but hey, sure. They're trying to do it kind of like, True Detective, American Horror Story, basically Fargo, all that kind of stuff. What's happened in previous it's been the latest flavor of the I guess you could say half decade, the last 5 years. Yeah. So that's what they're trying to do with this. So Laurie, of course, sees this on the TV and tells him to turn that shit off. And we see Angela's in a cell, and Laurie's explaining to her how they make nostalgia pills, by going to the mine there and all that kind of stuff, and how Redford outlawed it, and Lady True was the one that actually owned the company that makes nostalgia, and so she was the one that was hurt by it. And as she's telling Angela this, Angela is starting to trip balls, with the memory thing, and is seeing somebody standing inside the. Yeah, I know exactly, Pen. Um, she sees some guy with a drum standing inside the cell with her in black and white. And Lori says, "You know what? I can't get your stomach pumped unless I get your consent. Can I get your consent on this thing?" And she goes, "Before you start going under, or is it starting to affect you? Or starting to see things?" And of course, Angela is now in a black and white memory of Will being sworn in as a New York City Police Department officer. And as they're standing there and they're getting their badges pinned on them by a white chief, the white chief passes them up. But the black lieutenant that's after the chief says, "I get the honor of pinning the badge to you." And the lieutenant leans into him and whispers, "Beware the Cyclops," is what he says. And Will's like, "What?" And before anything else can happen, the lieutenant has moved on now at this point. And in the audience is June, who is his wife, who's also a reporter from what it looks like there too. And he goes out with June that night to celebrate, and he's happy that she was there with him and all that. And he says he's disappointed. He says, "I know you're disappointed that I joined the enemy," as he says, that I sold out. And he goes, "But really feel that I need to be here. I need to do this." And she says, "Yeah, no, I'm not disappointed." She goes, "I just know that you're angry." And she says, "You're angry because you watched a whole town being murdered right in front of you, and you won't confront that memory," is what she tells him. And that's the reason why you're angry all the time, is you won't confront that memory. So then we see Will walking his beat, and we keep replacing him with Angela being him, and it happens at certain times. So this is what's happening throughout here. This is actually a decent episode. We get a background story on Will, and it kind of fills in the comic, honestly, more than it does this episode until the very end. Until I should say, it fills in the comic more than it does the season, shall we say, the season story. But we'll get into that in just a minute here. So Will's walking his beat, and we see in the headlines that the Nazis are heading west in Europe, and he sees this fat guy throw a Molotov cocktail into a Jewish deli, and Will's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And the guy basically says, "Nothing. Don't worry. I don't know. It's none of your business." And he's walking away, and Will's like, "I'm going to arrest you for doing that." And because I heard there was rats in there, and he goes, "They were chewing on the wiring." He goes, "You're new here, so just let me go," kind of thing. And Will's like, "No, fuck that." And he arrests the guy and brings him in. And when he brings the guy into the department, the guy denies it and says he calls Will a spook, of course. And one of the other officers, who's white, takes offense to it and says, "Apologize to him. Apologize to my to the other officer." And so this fat guy does. He apologizes to Will, and he takes him in for booking. Well, Will's out on the beat again the next day, and he's talking to the newsstand owner who's got Superman #1. And they're asking, he's asking what's that about? And about a child who gets put in a rocket from another planet, and that's being destroyed and gets sent to Earth. Of course, we know all of this. And Will is flashing back to Tulsa, what's going on in Tulsa. So he has a little bit of familiarity with this kind of story. And that's when he sees this fat guy, whose name is Fred, by the way, out on the street. He's free. And yeah, the guy's just pretty nonchalant about it, just going, "Yeah, whatever," walking by past him. And he goes back to confront the desk sergeant, and the desk sergeant tells Will that maybe you're confused. Maybe you you saw the wrong guy out in the street kind of thing. And Will's like, I know who I saw. You let him go. And the desk sergeant says, don't push it. He goes, otherwise, you're just going to end up dead, essentially. He's trying to warn him off. He goes, just go home, man. So Will is walking home, and a group of officers, including the white officer who was supposedly, offended by Fred calling Will a spook. Yeah. Um, and he's in the car with two other officers, and he wants to give Will a ride home, maybe go get a drink kind of thing. And, there's very ominous tones going on there. And Will's like, no, no, I'll take a rain check. I got to get home. I got to get up early, that kind of thing. And like, all right. And they drive off. So Will's walking down an alleyway, and sure enough, the car comes by and cuts him off. And all the officers come out, and they're like, a rain check later isn't just going to cut it for us. And they start beating the fuck out of him with the batons and knock him out. And when he comes to, they are dragging him towards a tree in Central Park. They put a hood over his head, a rope around his neck, and hang him. And we see through his mask, through the hood. He can barely see through it. And this is where our viewpoint is. And they cut him down. They don't kill him. And the white officer tells him, next time you stick your nose in business that isn't yours, in white folks' business, as he puts it, we're not going to cut you down. And they leave him there, laying there, you know, on the ground. And then we switch over to Angela. Angela's now in his body, kind of thing. And she's both scared and pissed at the same time. And you can see, this going on. And ends up walking home. He still has a noose around his neck. He still has the hood in his hand when he comes across a robbery in progress. And these three guys are robbing a man and a woman. And he rips holes into the hood so he can see, slips it over his head, and then goes in and beats the shit out of these guys that are robbing these people, saving them, and they go running off. So Will comes into June's place afterwards, and he just looks like shit. And he tells her that, yeah, I guess I was angry. That's what he tells her. And then he passes out on her couch. So he wakes up the next afternoon. She's already gone to work and come back again, and shows him the paper that he's made the paper, having saved the two people that they thought, they pretty much said they weren't going to survive if they hadn't been saved. And she goes, "Why'd you put on the hood?" And Will's like, because I had it in my hand. And she goes, "No, what about that movie you told me about that you watched as a kid over and over again? What was the name of it?" And she says, "Trust in the Law." And he tells her it was about Bass Reeves bringing a white sheriff to justice. He had a hood over his head and everything, and brings them to the townspeople and shows that this white sheriff broke the law, and the town erupts in cheers. And it's a whole bunch of white folks. She even says, she goes, "What color were the townsfolk?" And he says, "White." He goes, "Do you really think that's going to happen in real life?" And she goes, "You better keep that hood on," is what she tells him. Yeah. And just make people think that you're white if you're going to keep doing this kind of thing. So his first thing that he does, he goes after that arsonist Fred, and he remembers the words "Beware the Cyclops" that the lieutenant gave him, and he's following these guys that work for Fred, and they come to a door and they go inside, and Will comes down, as the hooded justice, knocks on the door. When it opens, when the little flap opens up, he kicks the door in, and we find out it's full of Klansmen. They're all dressed in Klans gear. And he beats the shit out of these guys, deservedly so. And once he's knocked most of them down, he finds a map with all these town names on them. And then he sees a book. It says Mesmerism for the Masses. That's also there. And he's wondering what that is before he gets attacked again, knocks out the last guy, and then busts into the shop where Fred and his goons are waiting. And Fred and his goons have guns, and they're like, "Who the hell are you?" And they start shooting at him, and he jumps through the window, through the front plate glass window. And that's when everything slows down. And we end up having Lori coming in, and it's Angela who's underneath the hood. We can see her eyes at this point, and she's trying to talk Lori. She's trying to talk Angela out of it, and says, "Hey, um, we gave you a shot of adrenaline. You're kind of I know, frozen now." She goes, "It's kinda freaky. You got your eyes open. Blink if you can hear me." And Angela does, and she goes, "Okay, good." She goes, "I have Cal here. Cal's gonna read you something. It's supposed to snap you out of it." And he's basically telling her who she is, who he is, their kids, where they met, all this kinda stuff, and he's trying to snap her out of it. He keeps repeating it over and over again, and, she ends up snapping back into Will's memories again. And at this point, he and June are married. Uh, and this guy, Garner, comes over, wanting to talk to Will. And he says that Captain Metropolis is trying to form a team called the Minutemen, or the New Minutemen, excuse me. And that they want the Hooded Justice to join them because the Hooded Justice was the one that has pretty much inspired everybody to put on costumes and fight crime. And they're like, "Okay, well, what are you doing here then?" He goes, "Well, the Captain Metropolis is a really good tactician and knows that he's been plotting where the Hooded Justice has been spotted and all this stuff, and he knows that a police officer has given him all this information, and it's you who's given them." Basically, they're dancing around the fact he knows that he is the Hooded Justice, and both June and Will start laughing because they know that Garner is actually Captain Metropolis. Because June even brings it up. She goes, "Isn't Captain Metropolis that blonde hair guy kind of like you, kind of thing?" And so yeah, they know each other now at this point. And Will says, "Well, there is." He tells him about the Cyclops, and Garner says it sounds like a job for the Minutemen if he's willing to join. And he ends up leaving, of course. So Um, Will is talking to June that, you know, he wants to do it, and she's like, "No, you shouldn't." And then the next thing we see him, Will is fucking Garner from behind. Yeah. So, Will happens to be gay. We find this out too, Will Reeves. And Garner, after they're done, says that if he joins, he's going to need to stay covered up because some of the people in the group aren't as tolerant as he is, as he puts it. So Will had been using white makeup around his eyes for the hood. So that's why everyone thought he was white. Yeah. And he goes, and by the way, I got an idea. Next time we fuck, why don't we put on, leave our costumes on, kind of thing. So yeah. Uh, so then we split over to him in bed with June, and June tells him, tell me about the first time we met. And then he recounts the story of the baby in the field. She was the baby basically that he found, and he ends up marrying her. And he goes, "I picked you up and I told you to stop crying, and you did." And she goes, "Yeah, don't make me ever cry ever again. Don't make me start crying again." She goes, "Oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant." Yeah. So the Hooded Justice makes a press appearance, and Captain Metropolis. Basically, they're saying, "Well, what are you going to do first?" Is what the press asks the Hooded Justice, and he starts to bring up the Cyclops, and Captain Metropolis cuts him off, and instead talks about a guy trying to bring together a death ray from the sun, and basically cuts him off at that point. And then Captain Metropolis launches into a commercial, almost kind of like Osmandius in a way. And I'm wondering if Captain Metropolis is related somehow to Osmandius or Vite or whatnot. I mean, I know his name's Garner, but who knows? They could have been related at some point. Dun dun dun. Yeah, exactly. So we flash forward to June. She's pregnant, and then having the baby. Then the baby is now a toddler, and he keeps watching Will as Will is sitting at the makeup counter, the little dressing stand there, putting on his makeup and removing his makeup, putting on his makeup, removing his makeup, and his baby boy is actually watching him do this as he's growing up. So Will, in his police uniform, of course, arrives at a theater, and it looks like a riot took place. And Will's asking what the hell happened, and one of the white officers says, "Well, you know what happens when you get all these animals in one place." And he goes, "Why don't you go in and see?" He goes, "You could talk to them. You speak their language," kind of thing, is what he says. And Will goes in, and we see all these dead bodies here and there, and this woman is crying in the theater, and he asks her what happened, And she says, when the movie started, the lights started flickering, and she said a voice in my head told me to hurt the others. She goes, and I think I killed him, is what she says. She's pointing down at the guy on the ground, and she's crying and said, the voice, the voice, the voice. And Will calls it into Captain Metropolis. He's actually in the alleyway, and he looks behind the alley there, and he sees that these guys are loading in a projector into the back of a truck. And he's kind of putting two and two together at the Cyclops thing. And he calls up Captain Metropolis, and Captain Metropolis says, "No," he goes, "That's ridiculous." He goes, "A mind control device from the Klan? That's ridiculous. You sure you weren't drinking?" kind of thing. And then he says, "You know what?" Because the Minutemen aren't going to help you. It's not something that the Minutemen will do. So when he gets done, with the phone call, who's standing outside his phone booth but Fred, the arsonist? And Fred goes, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "I know everyone on the beat in this town and in this part of the town, and you're not it." He goes, "Oh, you're here for one of the free steaks." He goes, "Yeah, one of the boys in blues, they always get a free steak. You can bring something home to the missus." And he goes, "My warehouse is right here, right across the street." And that's when Will puts two and two together. And he's like, "Oh, your warehouse is right across the street, huh?" He's like, "Yeah." And boom, Will shoots Fred in the head. Fred is dead. And then he goes over to the warehouse and starts shooting guys there, and finds the projector and plans for the projector. And basically, the projector is a mind control device. And he goes into another room and sees the white cop who strung him up has headphones on so he couldn't hear all the shooting. And he is recording his voice to have basically black people kill each other and nobody else except for each other, and even hurt themselves. That's what this is all trying to do. And he shoots that. Basically, he's run out of bullets at this point, and he ends up strangling him with a cord. So, yeah. So he piles all the bodies on top of each other, covers them in gas, takes the projector, and then lights the entire place on fire. So Will takes the projector home and then sees his son putting on his makeup and dressed up in his costume. And the son goes, "I'm like you, Daddy." And he's like, "No, no, no, no." And he just takes the kid and starts scrubbing the makeup off of him. And then June grabs the kid and says, "I thought you were going to be able to work this shit out of your system. It's not happening. You need to go home and go, to Tulsa and work shit out." And he goes, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I'm not talking to you," which was kind of a weird thing. And then she says, "I'm leaving." And basically, she takes her son and leaves. So that's when we see old Will now at this point, sitting on the side of the road when Judd's truck runs over the strip and his tires blow out. And Will uses a flashing light, like a big flashlight, and it's basically a mind control device to hypnotize Judd into pushing him and his wheelchair up the hill to the tree with the noose. And then he starts talking to Judd afterward. He had turned it off, and Judd says, "You know what? I'm trying to help you people," is what he says. And he tells Will that he doesn't understand what's happening, what's going on, why he is there, why Judd is there. And this is the same thing that Senator Keene Jr. had said as well, is that he's there for a reason why why they're leading the cavalrymen or why they've stepped in as for the heads of the cavalrymen. So we've got another mystery upon a mystery happening here, because that's what the mystery box is all about. Mysteries upon mysteries. And Judd tells him, he goes, "You don't know who I am." And Will goes, "Oh, but I do." And he does the little OK symbol on, from his forehead there. And then he puts the light back on and tells Judd to hang himself. And then we see Angela is now Will sitting in the wheelchair, and she's doing this and watching all of this. And Angela starting to have a flood of memories now at this point. They're all coming fast and furious. And it ends with her grandmother, who of course is June, telling her to snap out of it, that she's bringing her back now. And she ends up waking up in a room with Lady True, welcoming her back. And that's where we leave off on the episode. Um, Not a bad episode. We kind of got through like I said, is the comic book backstory is more or less of what it was, but it didn't push the show forward any further. In fact, it added another layer because now we need to know what in the fuck Judd, why he's doing this, why is Keen doing this, um, and quite honestly, I don't know if I really care to tell you the truth, but I don't know. Penn says, just trying to decide what I think about this show. This episode is a little heavy handed. Yeah, it was heavy handed, but shit like this does happen. I mean, not the mind control stuff, but and certainly not people dressing up as superheroes, but I'm talking about the racism and stuff like that. But yeah, yeah. I know they want it for the show, but Hooded Justice just doesn't make much sense to be Will. Yeah, it can Apple Crow. I know where they're going, with that part of it, and that's kind of where I thought they were at the very beginning. Is that Will was Hooded Justice to begin with, and then they kind of threw in that red herring about him being white because of the whole American hero story that was on, and that's kind of what threw me off for a second. But then I remembered from the comic, I don't know if it was Rorschach or Dr. Manhattan. I think it was Dr. Manhattan who said he was African American. So, because he could see right through the hood, of course. Another question answered: how did Judd really get hanged by an old man in a wheelchair? Yeah, exactly. Yes, the flashlight had the same effect as the the projector in the theater. Yeah, that's because he took the projector with him and he took the plans too. So he had everything that he needed to build one of those to make it a portable device. The line about plenty of meat was unnecessary. Well, it was just showing how much of a fucking racist Fred was. That's all. We already knew he was a racist, but they just needed to drive that point home a little bit further than they needed to. I didn't see the trailer for next week because Mr. Robot was starting right as that was getting ready to happen. And yeah, Fred was a total jerk and he needed to die. I mean, you really wanted Fred to die at this point. Um, yeah. So, um, better than average episode. I mean, I still don't know where they're going with this because again, it's mystery box, and yeah, I'm not doing any kind of mental gymnastics in order to figure out what's happening. So I'm just kind of letting it roll at this point. Um, for me, it's probably a 7 out of 10 on that. No, 6.5. Yeah, 7. I'll say 7 out of 10 for this episode. I mean, um, moved along. We got a good story out of it, I guess you could say. And yeah, I mean, it's apples and oranges, Pen. Mr. Robot's a different show altogether. Yeah, watching this before Mr. Robot uh is better than having watched Mr. Robot before this. So yeah, I'm glad that I really so those of you who are wondering why I keep talking about Mr. Robot during this thing, it's because they're on the same night, they're back to back, and uh that's what happens. To quote Marie Antoinette, this episode was meh. Yeah, Ejar, it filled in some story. That's all it was. I don't know what kind of story it filled in, but it filled in some story. Like I said, it filled in more of the comic than it did the season. All it did was it gave us who killed Judd and how. That's really what it was. It was a long build up to who killed Judd and how. And then also gave us that the hooded justice was you know Will. It was a lot of filler. For a 9-episode season, this was an episode. This is a filler episode. It really was. Yes, I agree with you, Penn. Last week's episode was better. This is just filler. Applecrow says I saw the first episode with my brother this weekend since he has HBO. I loved it. I was shocked how meh it was. He loved it. I was shocked at how meh it was. It felt like someone was trying hard to mimic how good things are done. Yeah, Applecrow. It's It's like someone trying to do a bad cover of, I don't know, whatever musician you wanna pick from, any classic musician you wanna pick from, the Beatles, Elvis, you know, uh, you know, George Clinton. It got better once Gene Smart, yeah, once Gene Smart came in, it did move along. So there is a theory out there that Lube Man, the lubed up guy is actually Petey, Agent Petey. Because remember he was talking about, wearing a mask and all that kinda stuff, and he was sent to actually spy on Angela by Lori, so possibly that, Petey is actually Lube Man. He does have the same kind of build, and, that would actually kinda make sense. But yeah, watching him kinda scramble down the street there and spraying lube all over himself before sliding into the sewer, that's one of the more surreal, um, kinda scenes out of this series. I don't know. We'll see where this goes, quite honestly. I believe the word you were looking for as far as the first episode was polarizing. Yeah, I guess you could say that. It is polarizing. You either really like it or you really don't. And I don't think there really is kind of an in between on that one. Definitely looks like PD is Lube Band does the PD file. You know what? I haven't gotten the PDpedia, the pedophilia. I mean, the PDpedia. I haven't gotten back because, quite honestly, I'm just not that into it. Uh, and there's plenty of other things. I actually went further into The Mandalorian than I did this one, and I may have to do just a separate video just on my Mandalorian homework that I was doing because I watched a couple episodes of Clone Wars and there's something in Rebels too, and there's all kinds of stuff that's kind of leading me back to something. Yeah. I would say it was hoping to be polarizing, but I don't know if it earned that. Yeah, it's kind of like you want to go, yeah, meh, yeah. It's one of those things. I know there's some people that are really, really, really into the show, and I'm glad that it is bringing people into comics. It's bringing people into that kind of world. But at the same time, for those of us who actually have been in this for a long time, who love the Watchmen, who grew up with it, it kind of it kind of cheapens it in a way a little bit, and also it's I don't know. Well, I mean, it's DC Comics, so DC Comics has already cheapened Watchmen enough as it is with their whole series they've been doing for the last like 5, 6 years now. Um, so yeah, this is just kind of like another to me on that. I can't get up enough gumption to be outraged. Yeah, it's like someone said they love Mexican food, but all they've ever had is Taco Bell. Exactly, Apple Crow. I agree with you. That's pretty much it. That is the best analogy that you could come up with. I hate to say it. And yeah, I just can't get outraged about it anymore. I really can't. There are other there are other channels out there that do get outraged by it, and you know, whatever. Uh, I'm not going to be one of those channels. I'm sorry. I'm really not. If you love what you're watching here, with the HBO stuff, with Watchmen and stuff like that, more power to you. I'm not telling you that you're wrong. Uh, your opinion is your opinion. My opinion is I just don't like it all that much. I mean, so yeah. And yes, exactly, HR over the lost potential of what it could have been. I agree with you. So there we have that. A lack of outrage, outrageous. Yeah, I just don't get it. I'm sure I'm going to hear about this in the comments. So remember, send your comments. If you like what you see here, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button down below. If you're still on the fence about joining up here, you're going to see a video pop up here. And basically, what YouTube does, they have the algorithm of all the stuff you've been watching, and they're going to pluck one video that matches that algorithm as best as possible out of my vast video library and pop it up there for you. Up here is going to be, I'm going to put Mr. Robot up here. I'm going to put Mr. Robot up there. There we go. Yeah. So like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want to know when I'll be on live again next, excuse me, you can hit the bell down below there, and it's 50-50 chance of YouTube actually notifying you. If you want to know when I'm going to be on, just go to my Facebook page. My schedule is up there. It's also on my website, suspendedfanimation.com. And on Facebook, there's a Facebook group where you guys can post stuff and chat amongst yourselves. I also have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, and I have a Patreon page. I don't have any tier stuff as of yet. I will at the end of this year, beginning of next year. There we go. So, yeah, I'm not dropping Titans. I'll drop Titans after this Friday. How about that, HR? After this Friday, I'll drop Titans. So, just for the season anyway. Um, Tomorrow is going to be His Dark Materials. I'm going to be doing that. I'm off Tuesday, Wednesday, and Turkey Day, Thursday. I'll be back on Friday for another doubleheader, which is going to be The Mandalorian and the final episode of Titans. Yes. Saturday is going to be Saturday Morning Blast Off. And then we roll back around again to Sunday with the doubleheader of Mr. Robot and Watchmen. There we go. So thank you, everybody who joined me tonight in the chat. And thank you if you made it this far in the video, too. And if you're outraged, you know, you're off all week. I'm always off, Ejar. Just off kilter. That's how it is. Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, I was trying to figure out where they were going with this episode. I really was. And yeah, I'm not going to dwell on it anymore. It's over with. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to let you guys go for the evening. Yeah, please hit that like button before you go. Again, take a look at the videos up here and up here if you're still on the fence about joining up, and then hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below there. Until tomorrow, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. Otherwise, you may find out you've eaten way too much nostalgia, somebody else's nostalgia, and you're going to be having to go through their memories, including them fucking somebody else from behind. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.